Valentine's Day should have ended with flowers and laughter. But in Parkland, Florida, it began with gunfire echoing through the halls of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. Nicholas Cruz grew up moving from one home to another and from one school to the next. Many people who knew him later described him as quiet, distant, and troubled. He was born in Margate, Florida, in September 1998 and was adopted when he was a baby. By the time he turned 19, both of his adoptive parents had passed away. He was then living with relatives in the months leading up to the tragedy. From preschool, teachers and school staff noticed constant behavioral struggles. He was moved between schools several times and received special education support. As a teenager, he started showing a growing fascination with harmful incidents. He also posted disturbing and hateful content on social media. Many of those warnings were seen later as red flags that went unnoticed or unaddressed. On Valentine's Day, February 14, 2018, Cruz entered Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School carrying a firearm. He had legally purchased it earlier. Within a few minutes, he moved through hallways and classrooms, opening fire on students and staff. 17 people lost their lives that day, and another 17 were hurt. It became one of the most tragic school incidents in recent U.S. history. The school grounds turned into scenes of panic and chaos as students tried to escape, leaving behind a community forever changed. But why did he do it? Why that school? Investigators later pieced together details from Cruz's past and found reasons tied to pain, resentment, and anger. Prosecutors said he acted out of revenge and long-held bitterness toward classmates. His defense lawyers argued that his actions came from a troubled life filled with trauma, the loss of his parents, serious emotional struggles, and possible effects of prenatal exposure to substances. To the families who lost their loved ones, none of those reasons mattered compared to the fact that a plan and a weapon led to 17 lives being taken away. Before that day, there had been many missed chances to stop him. A month earlier, Cruz had posted an online comment saying he wanted to become a professional school shooter. The message was reported to the FBI, but it was never linked to him correctly, and no action followed. Over the years, there had been school warnings, suspensions, police visits, and worries raised by his relatives. Many later asked whether the system had failed to act in time. The FBI later admitted that the tip was mishandled, a mistake that added to the heartbreak. After he was taken into custody, Cruz faced 34 charges in total. 17 were for taking lives, and 17 were for attempting to harm others. The case stretched on for years, drawing national attention. The defense portrayed Cruz as a deeply damaged young man shaped by early neglect, mental illness, and a difficult upbringing. The prosecution described his actions as calculated and relentless, calling it a planned and methodical attack on innocent lives. The courtroom saw months of emotional testimony from survivors, experts, and grieving families, as well as a detailed breakdown of how the tragedy unfolded. In October 2021, Cruz pleaded guilty to all charges. Prosecutors said this move avoided a longer and more painful trial. During the hearing, he addressed the victims' families, saying, "I'm very sorry for what I did, and I have to live with it every day." His words were quoted in many reports but felt small compared to the suffering caused. The judge even had to ask him to clarify who he was talking to and whether he fully understood what was happening. The sentencing phase began in late 2022. Family members and survivors delivered emotional statements, describing how their lives had been changed forever. The jury did not reach a unanimous decision for the harshest possible penalty. This meant, under Florida law, the judge had to impose a sentence of life in prison without the chance of release. Families reacted with pain and disbelief. Some felt that justice had not been served, while others saw it as the only outcome left after years of court battles. The judge officially gave Cruz 34 consecutive life sentences. During the final hearings, the courtroom was filled with raw emotions. Families spoke directly to Cruz, expressing anger, heartbreak, and loss. Many told him what had been taken from them could never be restored. The case not only focused on Cruz, but also reignited national discussions about gun access, mental health care, law enforcement's response to warnings, and how to reach troubled young people before they cause harm. It left the nation with difficult questions about accountability and prevention that still remain today. A tragedy at a school shocked an entire community, but what does it mean when a much younger teen turns even more brutal? He seemed like an ordinary kid. He lived in the same county, went to the same school, and grew up in the same small neighborhood as his classmate. But on the night of May 9th, 2021, everything changed. 13-year-old Tristan Bailey, a cheerleader, was reported missing on Mother's Day. A few hours later, a local resident discovered her in a wooded area near her home. The medical examiner said she had many injuries, more than 100. Many of them showed that she had tried to protect herself. These details shocked the entire community. People couldn't believe that two young teens who once walked the same streets could end up in such a heartbreaking situation. As the investigation continued, more facts started to appear. Security cameras captured Tristan walking with someone in the early hours of that morning. That person, police said, was Aiden Fucci, friends later told investigators that Aiden had often talked about dark thoughts. He had drawn disturbing pictures and said he wanted to know what it felt like to hurt someone. A friend named Dofus Abshur appeared in reports as the person Aiden had asked for Tristan's phone number the night before. Other witnesses remembered him pretending to make harmful motions with a small sharp tools. Investigators also noticed white shoes in the camera footage. Later, they found Aiden's DNA on items collected from the scene. Piece by piece, these details built the case that prosecutors later presented in court. But one question remained. Why would a 14-year-old do something like this? The court and investigators found no reason such as money, revenge, or a fight. They said it came from an interest in harm and a desire to act on it. The absence of a clear reason made the event even harder for people to understand. Prosecutors said it was not a sudden act, but something planned ahead of time. Investigators worked quickly. While the town waited for answers, Aiden was taken into custody. The story took another turn when his mother, Crystal Smith, was charged for trying to wash his jeans, which had red stains on them. She later admitted it in court and accepted responsibility. She received a short jail term and probation. That moment made many people focus not only on what had happened, but also on how Aiden's family reacted afterward. When the legal process began, jury selection was about to start in February 2023. But before it could, Aiden changed his mind. He stood up in court and admitted what he had done. "I just want to say I plead guilty, and I'm sorry for the Bailey family and my family," he said. Later, he wrote a handwritten letter to the judge, saying sorry again and repeating his apology several times. By admitting guilt, he avoided a full trial, but the court still held a sentencing hearing where Tristan's family could speak about their pain. The sentencing hearing was deeply emotional. Tristan's classmates, teachers, family, and friends all shared how much she meant to them. One of her siblings placed 114 aqua-colored stones in a jar, each representing one injury she had suffered. Tristan's parents spoke directly to the judge and to Aiden, expressing their heartbreak and disbelief. After listening to everyone and reviewing the evidence, the judge gave Aiden the highest possible sentence for someone his age under Florida law: life in prison, with a chance for review after 25 years. The judge said it was one of the hardest cases he had ever handled, and that there was still no clear reason behind it. His words echoed what the community had felt from the start: confusion and sorrow over a tragedy that made no sense. During the hearing, Aiden didn't say much. His thoughts were shared mainly through letters and short comments. Family members from both sides also wrote to the court. Some asked for forgiveness, while Tristan's family said no apology could ever make things right. When the judge announced the sentence, the legal part ended, but the emotional pain did not. The community still had to face the loss and the many questions that would never be answered. After the sentencing, several legal steps followed. There were appeals and reviews, as happens in most serious cases. The courts later examined them, but kept the sentence the same, making only small adjustments. These steps were mostly routine legal work, focused on checking for errors. For the public, it was just paperwork. What truly remained was the memory of Tristan, a young girl whose life ended too soon, and the lasting sadness in a town that would never forget her. The next case looked like 3 random tragedies at first, but investigators soon realized every victim knew the suspects. Taj Bruton grew up in Marion County, a small place where life seemed simple on the surface, but often had hidden troubles. There isn't much public information about his family or upbringing. Most reports focus on the path that led him and 2 other boys into an event that changed many lives in their community. By late March of 2023, Bruton was identified as one of 3 young people accused of being involved in the loss of 3 teenagers found around the Oklawaha area. The state described a situation involving planning, weapons, and the careless way the victims were left behind. These details turned what first appeared to be a local tragedy into a highly publicized case. The morning the victims were discovered, the entire area was in shock. Layla Silvernail was found near a dumpster with a serious injury to her head. Michael Hodo Jr. was discovered along a road with a similar wound. Camille Quarles was later found in the trunk of a car that had been partly submerged in a pond. Investigators said the car had been taken without permission, and Camille had been placed in the trunk before being harmed. These disturbing details helped prosecutors build their case, describing it as planned and intentional. Authorities said the events did not appear to be random. Marion County deputies and the state attorney explained that the case involved armed theft and the use of guns during encounters that escalated. Officials said the suspects were part of what they called a wannabe gang. This meant they were not part of an organized group, but were seeking attention and status. Prosecutors argued this showed clear planning. A grand jury charged Bruton and another teen, Robert Robinson, with 3 counts of first-degree homicide. The third, Christopher Atkins, was charged with 1 count. Because of how serious the actions were, all 3 were charged as adults. Reports later revealed that the victims knew the suspects. The state's theory, supported by witness statements and collected evidence, was that the incidents followed a series of thefts and arguments. Prosecutors said the group used a gun during the theft and then tried to hide what they had done. Placing one of the victims in a car trunk and leaving the car in a pond, along with the gunshot wounds, showed a level of planning that prosecutors said was cold and deliberate. These details became central during plea hearings and sentencing. By mid-2024, the case had gone through many hearings and plea discussions. Bruton and Robinson eventually entered no-contest pleas to multiple charges. This allowed the court to accept their pleas and move directly to sentencing without a full trial. Bruton received several life sentences, 1 for each victim, plus extra years for related offenses, such as armed theft and tampering with evidence. Under the plea deal, he will be eligible for a review of his life sentences after 25 years. The court said the sentence reflected how serious the acts were and Bruton's prior record. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was serious and quiet. Judges spoke about the harsh nature of what had happened and the need for responsibility. Bruton's sentencing ended a case that had held the community's attention for more than 2 years. Robinson also received multiple life sentences. The youngest defendant, Christopher Atkins, who was 12 at the time, received a 40-year sentence. His plea deal included cooperation with prosecutors. Because of his age, his sentence can be reviewed after 25 years. The different outcomes showed how the court weighed each person's role in cooperation. Investigators said that peer pressure, a desire for recognition, and poor choices linked to thefts all played a part in what happened. News reports and the prosecutor's office described how impulsive teenage behavior mixed with planning led to a devastating result. The community's reaction was full of pain. Families wanted justice, neighbors demanded answers, and schools tried to help students cope with the loss of classmates and friends. Officials made it clear that age would not protect anyone from full legal consequences. During sentencing, the courtroom focused on the facts. There were no reports of any dramatic final statements from Taj Bruton. Media coverage centered on the legal results, the life sentences, the additional years, and the possibility of review after 25 years. If Bruton made any short remarks, they were not part of the public record. In the end, the case closed quietly, documented through legal outcomes rather than emotional moments. Now let's turn to one summer in Florida, where a teenager's idea of excitement left 2 men gone and a town living in fear. Conrad Schaefer was a teenager from Central Florida. In the summer of 2013, he went from being an ordinary kid in his community to the main suspect in a series of harmful incidents that left 2 men gone and an entire town shaken. Authorities later connected him to a 15-day spree involving shootings and armed break-ins around Kissimmee and Poinciana. One of the incidents happened at a bus stop where 17-year-old David Guerrero was hit by gunfire. Another occurred during a home break-in, which led to the passing of 22-year-old Eric Rupnerine. These events were widely covered by local news outlets at the time. When Schaefer was arrested, he was only 15. His age became one of the most discussed points during the case. Many people struggled to understand how someone so young could be involved in such acts. Prosecutors said Schaefer had taken part in several shootings that investigators described as random, and in one instance done for fun. That phrase came directly from officials and fueled anger across the community. Parents, neighbors, and families of the victims couldn't make sense of how a boy could take part in something so cruel. The case involved more than Schaefer. Police arrested several other teenagers who were believed to have been part of the same group. Reports described a pattern of drive-by shootings that didn't injure anyone, armed thefts, and other coordinated acts of harm. Forensic evidence later linked Schaefer to several of these events, placing him among the main suspects. Because of how serious and repetitive his actions were, the state decided to try him as an adult. That decision shaped how the entire legal process unfolded. But what made it happen? Investigators gave a direct and unsettling explanation. They said that some of the shootings happened simply because the group enjoyed the excitement of it. Detectives described how the teens fired into cars and homes and even shot a young man waiting at a bus stop. None of these seemed to be motivated by money or personal grudges. When asked why a 15-year-old would do such things, investigators pointed to peer pressure, easy access to weapons, and a careless attitude toward life among the group. Communities often look for a single reason behind actions like these, such as family problems, emotional issues, or gang influence. But in Schaefer's case, officials believed it was more about recklessness and thrill-seeking mixed with opportunity. Schaefer's journey through the court system ended with a plea deal. In January 2016, he admitted guilt to 2 counts of first-degree homicide in exchange for having other charges dropped. This deal helped avoid a jury trial and moved the case directly to sentencing. In April that same year, he received a life sentence. Reports stated that he would be allowed a parole hearing after 25 years. For the families of the victims, this marked the end of a long wait for justice. The reaction from those families was emotional. Public records and local news coverage showed deep grief and frustration. The relatives of Rupnarin and Guerrero attended court hearings and spoke about the pain of waiting for years. Their statements showed that, while they finally got a legal resolution, it could never bring full peace. During one of the hearings, Schaefer apologized to the families. News outlets reported his apology, but it didn't lessen the impact of what had happened. Many in the community felt that a lifetime sentence was the least he deserved. Others struggled with the idea that the person responsible had been just a teenager. The details of the events drew widespread attention because of how casually some of the acts were planned and carried out. One incident reportedly involved tricking victims into coming closer before opening fire. Another involved shooting at random houses and cars in quiet neighborhoods. Since these actions seemed to be done out of excitement rather than personal reasons or theft, people were left more disturbed. It made them feel unsafe, as if harm could come without warning or reason. This case eventually became part of larger discussions in Central Florida. People talked about youth supervision, access to weapons, and the growing problem of thrill-seeking harm among teens. Even years later, the community remembered the 15 days that changed everything. Next is a different kind of horror. 3 friends gone, and one of the accused was just 12. And if you find stories like these important, consider subscribing. The first time the police mentioned 3 people being found lifeless in Ocklawaha, the town could hardly believe it. 3 young friends were gone, and their bodies were discovered in different places over a day and a half. The victims were named Layla Silvernail, Michael Hodo Jr., and Camille Quarles. All of them knew each other, and what happened left their families and friends heartbroken. Investigators soon connected the case to 3 other young people who had been seen together with them that same night. Their names were Robert Robinson, Taj Bruton, and Christopher Atkins. When formal charges were filed, the public learned that Robinson and Bruton were older teens, while Atkins was only 12 years old when everything took place. Authorities said the situation began among a group of young people but turned into something far more serious. The case involved planning, a firearm, and attempts to hide what had happened. A grand jury later confirmed formal charges in May 2023. Robinson and Bruton each faced 3 counts of first-degree unlawful taking of life, while Atkins faced 1 count. All 3 also faced charges for taking property by force and trying to destroy or hide evidence. Reports from the sheriff's office described how each victim was found. Layla was discovered near a dumpster. Michael was found beside a road. Camille was found in a car trunk that had been left in a pond. These details appeared in court documents and local news coverage. Prosecutors said Atkins had a smaller role than the others, but it was still directly connected to what happened to Camille and the events that followed. They said he helped hide evidence and took part in a planned theft that occurred before the others lost their lives. People found it hard to understand how someone so young could be caught up in something so harmful. The state attorney acknowledged his age but said the planning, weapon use, and cover-up showed adult-like intent. Why was such a young child even there? Investigators said the group of teens went out together that night, but things got out of control. Reports suggested that a planned theft and the presence of a firearm led to the tragic outcome. Witness statements, physical proof, and the discovery of the victims at different spots helped build the case against the three teens. Prosecutors described what happened as carefully planned, which influenced the decision to try them as adults. As the legal process moved forward, the focus shifted to responsibility and age. In April 2025, Christopher Atkins entered a guilty plea. He agreed to cooperate with authorities and testify against his two co-defendants. His admission changed the course of the case. Instead of going to trial, he went straight to sentencing. Prosecutors said that although Atkins was the least responsible of the three, what he took part in was still extremely serious. They also mentioned the extra charges involving theft and evidence tampering. His defense lawyers asked the judge to consider his young age, difficult childhood, and his clear regret. They also highlighted his cooperation and honesty from the start. In July 2025, the judge announced his sentence. Atkins was given 40 years in state custody for his role, with credit for time already served. The court also ruled that his sentence would be reviewed after 25 years. Local outlets reported the details, the plea, the time given, and the right to have a review later on. Robinson and Bruton later made their own plea agreements and received longer prison terms, including life sentences. In court, there were emotional moments when the victims' families spoke, and lawyers from both sides presented their arguments. No public record shows any last words from Atkins at his sentencing. Since his case ended through a plea deal, there were no death row or capital punishment proceedings. The focus remained on the court's decisions, the facts of the case, and the family's statements. Investigators later said that the plan to take property played a major role in what happened that night. They also said the firearm was the main reason the night turned fatal. Some reports suggested that the group wanted to appear part of a larger or tougher circle than they actually were. Local coverage described the acts as being planned and followed by attempts to hide what they had done. Because of that planning, prosecutors pushed for adult-level charges, even though the people involved were still so young. The next incident was the last day of school, a day that should have ended with celebration, not sirens. Nathaniel Brazil was a 7th grade student when one afternoon changed everything for him and for a small community in Florida. He was born in 1986 and grew up in Palm Beach County with his mother, Polly Powell. As a boy, he was interested in police work and also fascinated by firearms. That interest would later become part of how people remembered what happened. On May 26, 2000, which was the last day of the school year, Nathaniel returned to Lake Worth Middle School with a small handgun. That afternoon, he spoke to his English teacher, Barry Grunow. Then, a single shot went off, hitting the teacher and ending his life. Witnesses later said Nathaniel had come back after being sent home earlier that day. He had raised the gun in front of his teacher, and the shot struck him in the face. The whole incident left students, teachers, and parents in shock across the county. People who knew Nathaniel, and those who studied the case later, tried to understand how a 13-year-old ended up in such a tragic situation. The day before, he had been disciplined at school for throwing a water balloon, and for trying to talk to classmates he had been told to stay away from. When he returned the next day, he met Mr. Grunow near the classroom. Their encounter quickly grew tense. Nathaniel later said he only wanted to scare the teacher, claiming the gun went off by accident. Prosecutors, however, believed that bringing the gun to school and how he used it showed intention. The jury decided that his actions spoke louder than his explanation. The legal system now faced a difficult question. How should a child be treated when involved in something so serious? Nathaniel was charged as an adult. The trial drew national attention because it raised questions about whether young teens should face adult penalties and how the justice system should balance punishment with rehabilitation. The trial lasted only a few days, but the jury's decision took time. In the end, Nathaniel was found guilty of second-degree homicide and of endangering others. The judge sentenced him to 28 years in prison, followed by probation. Many people appealed the decision, arguing that he was too young for such a harsh sentence, but the conviction stayed. In that classroom, a few moments were remembered forever. Witnesses later recalled what might have been Mr. Grunau's final words. He said, "Stop pointing the gun at me, Nate." Those simple words became part of the record, short and painful. They were the last words heard from a man who was a father and a teacher, and who never made it home that day. Why did Nathaniel bring a gun to school? There was no single answer. Investigators pointed to several factors: his fascination with weapons, his trouble at school, tension with his teacher, and issues at home. Psychological reports studied his background and stress, but could not find one clear reason. The trial mainly focused on what he did, not why he did it. The jury ultimately agreed with the prosecution that it was more than an accident. The public reaction was strong and divided. Some believed a tough sentence was necessary to keep schools safe. Others argued that a 13-year-old deserved a chance at rehabilitation instead of a lifetime behind bars. International groups questioned why children were being treated like adults in such cases. For both families involved, the pain was personal. One lost a loved one, while the other watched their child grow up inside prison walls. In prison, Nathaniel's life followed a strict routine. He continued his education, followed rules, and tried to take part in rehabilitation programs. He filed legal appeals and gave interviews expressing regret, saying he wanted another chance at life. His sentence means he will spend many years in custody before being released. Records show his release date is still decades away. While his words of remorse have led some people to believe he has changed, the events of that day in 2000 still define how most people remember him. Up next is fear, manipulation, and a friendship that turned into something unthinkable. Joshua Henninger grew up in the quiet areas of Lee County. He was a teenager whose life changed completely one night, and that single night defined everything that followed. His mother and two younger sisters were said to be asleep in the house when everything happened. This detail was mentioned by his defense team to show that Joshua was scared and acted under the control of someone older. They described him as a frightened 16-year-old who was influenced and pressured by a much older person rather than acting on his own. However, the jury heard the evidence, and it was very clear what had happened that July in 2005. On July 21, 2005, 17-year-old Anna Marie Randazzo disappeared. 2 weeks later, her remains were found inside an old burned refrigerator in a field in Lehigh Acres. Investigators said it was one of the hardest scenes they had ever seen. Although the fire had destroyed much evidence, they were still able to find enough proof to show that Anna Marie had been taken against her will, badly harmed, and left in that field. 2 people were arrested: Jeremy Chapman, who was 23 at the time, and Joshua Henninger, who was 16. Authorities said both had planned what they did. According to investigators, they took Anna Marie, hurt her in multiple ways, and then tried to hide what they had done by setting the refrigerator on fire. The official charges included abduction, physical harm, arson, and taking a life with intent. Why would 2 people do something like that? What made them move from planning to such a cruel act? Prosecutors said it was not an accident or a moment of panic, but something done with full awareness. They presented evidence, including statements from both men, that showed how involved each one was. Chapman later admitted guilt to avoid a possible capital sentence and received life in prison. Henninger chose to go to trial. The jury found him guilty after only a few hours of discussion. His lawyers said he was scared of Chapman and only did what he was told out of fear, but the jury did not agree. For many who followed the case, the most disturbing part was not only the harm done to Anna Marie, but how she was left, hidden in a burned refrigerator in an empty field. In 2007, Henninger was sentenced to life in prison for his involvement in abduction, arson, and taking a life with intent. Because he was under 18 when it happened, he could not receive a capital sentence. Years later, the case took a new turn. In 2012, the United States Supreme Court ruled that automatic life sentences without parole for juveniles were unconstitutional. This meant that people like Henninger could have a new hearing to reconsider their sentence. At the resentencing hearing, the case returned to court. Family members of Anna Marie spoke about how their lives were forever changed. The prosecution said the act was so cruel that Henninger should remain in prison for life. The defense argued that he had changed over the years, showing better behavior and signs of rehabilitation. They asked the judge to consider his age at the time and the pressure he faced. Henninger himself spoke in court, breaking down several times. He said that Chapman had been the one in control and that he had been influenced and scared. The judge, after hearing both sides, decided to keep the life sentence. The court said that while the law now required considering his age and the possibility of change, the extreme cruelty of the act could not be ignored. Henninger remains eligible for a review in the future, depending on how long he serves. But for now, he continues to spend his life in prison. The effect of what happened went far beyond the courtroom. Anna Marie's family still lives with deep pain that time has not healed. The lead investigator said it was one of the most disturbing cases he had ever worked on. Over the years, the community has remembered Anna Marie and kept pressure for justice. The defense's claims that Henninger acted out of fear never erased the evidence, the photos, or the confessions that led to his conviction. Chapman's guilty plea and Henninger's life sentence created a clear result. One person avoided the most severe punishment by admitting guilt, while the other went to trial and received life in prison. Later, both became part of the national discussion about how courts should treat teenagers in serious cases. Now the question remains, can someone who was a frightened teenager ever truly change and deserve another chance? The law continues to ask that question. Courts must balance between what happened and who the person has become. In Henninger's case, the judge said that while he had to consider his age, the act itself showed extreme cruelty and lasting harm. The next girl was just a quiet 16-year-old from the outside. But inside her home, something far darker was unfolding. Courtney Schulhoff grew up in a home that seemed normal from the outside. She went to school, had friends, and lived what looked like a typical teenage life. But inside her Altamonte Springs apartment, things were different. By February 2004, Courtney was 16 and struggling emotionally. She had fallen deeply for a young man named Michael Morin. Their relationship was secretive and intense. Over time, it drew them away from friends and family. That winter, everything changed when an act inside their home turned their lives into headlines. On the night of February 9, 2004, Courtney's father, Stephen Schulhoff, was found severely injured in his apartment. Prosecutors later said that he had been repeatedly struck with a Louisville Slugger baseball bat, which was later discovered near the door. After the incident, Courtney and Michael drove away in her father's truck and stopped at a McDonald's about 20 miles away. They later returned to the apartment. Investigators later said that the two talked about moving Stephen's body and even mentioned taking it to Brevard County to dispose of it near a bridge. When Stephen's girlfriend arrived to check on him, she found the apartment in chaos. She quickly called for help. Police later located Courtney and Michael not long after that. From the very beginning, the two teenagers gave very different stories. Courtney first said she had gone out to walk the family dog and came back to find Michael covered in red stains. According to her, he told her that he had taken care of the problem. Michael's story also changed several times. He later said that he lost control during the struggle and deeply regretted what happened. Investigators saw these conflicting stories as signs of a plan. They believed Courtney had been directly involved, either by helping plan it or by assisting during the act itself. Prosecutors described her as a daughter angry at her father and influenced by her boyfriend. They said she had left the bat by the door and allowed Michael to go through with the act. The defense said the situation was far more complicated, that Courtney was young, scared, and under emotional pressure. Many wondered how a 16-year-old could end up in such a situation. Court documents and reports described a tense home life and a relationship that quickly became unhealthy. Courtney had talked about being mistreated at home and saw Michael as her only source of comfort. Over time, that emotional connection turned dangerous. When the case went to trial, Courtney was charged as an adult. Her trial began in late September 2006. Prosecutors said it was a planned act and that the evidence showed intent. The defense focused on her youth and the emotional circumstances leading up to that night. Courtney did not testify. Jury found her guilty of first-degree homicide. At that time in Florida, the law required a life sentence without parole for that conviction. even for a juvenile. After the verdict, Courtney stood up and spoke directly to the judge. She said, "Your Honor, I would like to openly admit in court that Michael Moran is not the person who hurt my father. I was. So, I accept full responsibility, and I accept the verdict." Her words shocked the courtroom and were reported widely. Michael Moran faced trial later. He admitted to being involved, but said he lost control and later tried to clean himself up. Both cases drew national attention because of the ages of those involved. Some people saw Courtney as manipulative. Others saw her as a broken teenager influenced by someone older. Supporters said she had faced mistreatment at home and was too young to fully understand her actions. Others pointed to her courtroom confession and the serious nature of what happened. Years later, new court rulings changed how juveniles were sentenced in the United States. In 2017, Courtney's life sentence was reduced to 40 years. The court recognized that minors should not automatically receive life without parole. This change gave her a chance for release one day. According to recent records, she remains at Lowell Correctional Institution in Florida. Her story became one of the most talked about examples of how teenage relationships, emotional struggles, and poor decisions can spiral into irreversible outcomes. The next victim thought he was meeting his ex to make peace, but it was a trap. Amber Wright grew up in a neighborhood where friends and rivals often lived close to each other. She was a normal teenager who kept the usual secrets about relationships, arguments, and changing friendships. By the spring of 2011, those small tensions had turned into something dangerous. Amber had been dating a boy named Seth Jackson, who was 15. After their breakup, their lives stayed connected. She started spending time with others, including Michael Bargo. Old jealousy and arguments began to grow worse. In the weeks before Seth vanished, things had become tense. There were heated exchanges, angry messages, and even a few physical confrontations. Witnesses later shared that these conflicts were growing fast and had reached a point where some people were talking about serious harm. One night, Seth went to a mobile home belonging to a girl named Charlie Ely. That visit turned out to be part of a trap. Investigators later said Amber and another girl had messaged Seth to come over, pretending they wanted to talk and possibly make peace. Seth believed them and decided to go. But when he arrived, things were not as they seemed. Inside, 3 young men were waiting. What happened next was shocking. Seth was severely beaten and shot. Afterwards, his body was burned, and what was left was placed into several paint buckets that were later thrown into a nearby quarry. Photos, forensic evidence, and witness statements presented during the trial showed how planned and deliberate the whole act was. In total, 5 people were charged: Amber Wright, her half-brother Kyle Hooper, Michael Bargo, the one who fired the weapon, Charlie Ely, and Justin Soto. Each played a different part that night. So, why would Amber message the boy she once cared for and lead him into a trap? Prosecutors said it was mainly jealousy and anger after the breakup. Seth had still been in contact with Amber, while she was also seeing others. This caused constant arguments, especially with Michael Bargo, who was possessive and quick to anger. Witnesses told the jury that Bargo had even made direct threats towards Seth days before it happened. These tensions, mixed with pride, jealousy, and teenage rivalries, built the motive that prosecutors later described in court. The legal process that followed was long and full of twists. Amber was still a teenager, so her case first went through the juvenile system. Authorities said she gave 2 taped confessions, but her lawyers argued that police made mistakes when questioning her. An appeals court later agreed that officers did not properly explain her rights before one of the confessions. Because of that, her first conviction was overturned, and she was given a new trial. Even so, the main evidence, the texts, the planning, and what happened afterward, stayed the same. Her co-defendants received heavy sentences. Charlie Ely and Justin Soto were given life terms. Michael Bargo, who played the lead role, faced the harshest punishment. In 2016, Amber was retried. By then, she was 19. The jury once again found her guilty of first-degree planning and helping in Seth's case. Prosecutors said Amber's messages and her presence that night made the plan possible. They said she was the person who brought Seth to the place where he was targeted and helped make sure it happened. Since Amber was under 18 at the time, her case raised big questions about how young people should be sentenced for such serious actions. Both she and her brother Kyle were minors then, and new Supreme Court decisions were changing how courts handle juvenile life sentences. Still, the judge described the case as one of the coldest and most calculated acts he had ever seen. Both Amber and Kyle received life sentences. Appeals continued for years, with her lawyers asking for reconsideration because of her age and possible police mistakes, but the verdict remained. In court, Seth Jackson's family spoke about their pain. His mother faced Amber directly and said, "Amber, we hope that guilt eats you inside and out." Her words showed the heartbreak the family had carried since losing Seth. Amber never gave any final statement like in some high-profile cases because she was sentenced to life in prison. She remains behind bars, serving her time. The case left a lasting impact. In Florida's legal history, Amber's first conviction was overturned because of improper police procedure, but her retrial brought the same result: guilty. Her lawyers continued to argue for a lighter sentence because she was young when it happened, while prosecutors kept focusing on her role in luring Seth and helping with the plan. Every appeal and ruling kept returning to the same facts. A 15-year-old tricked through messages, a harmful act that followed, an attempt to hide what was done, and several young lives ruined by one terrible night.